Railway sector. So maybe you can sit and take your seat. So please sit down. Thank you. So you have. So I'm Philippe Citroën. I'm Director General of UNIFE, the European Rail Supply Industry. They have asked me, ERA has asked me to be the moderator of the session. So around on the chairs, you have Guido, who is the head of Railway System Department of ERA. You have Libor Lockman, who already took the floor on many occasions, from Executive Director on CR. You have Monica Heiming, who is the Executive Director of EIM, the Infrastructure Managers Association. You have Michel Van Iveren from UNIFE, and who is UNISIC General Manager. You have from Unitel, after that you have Michel Ruzen from UEG, Managing Director. He already introduced himself this morning. Then we have Jean-Michel Evangelius, who is the Deputy Director of Rail System and Head of Telecom, Signaling and Digital Applications. And then we have Michael Menendra, who is Chairman of Unitel. So thank you for being here. Today it is a political day. We already had some political speeches from this morning from Matthias Rutte, the ERTMS coordinator, from Henrik Ololai, a very political speech on the Director General of DG Move, and from Carlo Borghini, who is Executive Director of Shift2Rail. They have mentioned the fact that with the new Commission, we are supposed to be quite lucky because this will be a Commission which will approve once they will be in place in 100 days, they will have to approve what they call a Green Deal. And if we are lucky, rail, as we are the backbone of mobility, will have an important place in this Green Deal. So the main objective of the panel is to let the conference session moderator draw the main conclusion of the interesting debate which were held during the session that they have organized in the past 2 days. In addition, this is also an opportunity for each of the panelists to present the main expectations they have, the expectation of their association about the future of railways. We don't have a lot of time, but maybe there will be some key points presented by them. And then they will have to answer 2 questions, but they will try to have a live debate between the panelists. And of course, if there are questions, you raise your hand. Let's say that after the 3 panelists, we could have a short debate with the people who are in this room. So I will start with one question for Pio Guido from ERA, who's been there, I think who's been there on ERTMS from the very beginning. And the question is that ERA has played a crucial role over the past 3 years in defining the main ERTMS regulatory framework to make the European ERTMS deployments smoother. Since the introduction of the 4th railway package, I would like to know how did the role of the agency change? Because now it has been said on many occasions, you are the ERA system authorities for ERTMS, a beautiful title, I would say. And then it will be also interesting to know a little bit what would be the approach of the agency to support the innovative railway evolution. What are the links that you have with Shift2Rail? It's also important to know about this. And could you say a few words on the ERTMS stakeholders platform? You have 3 or 4 minutes to answer to all those questions. And after that, you'll be happy if there are some remarks from the other panelists and from the room on this specific point. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Philippe. Yes, and thank you for the question. Indeed, we thought we packaged with our role now in delivering vehicle authorization. We have the privilege not only to write the specification, but to see what effect it does when you have to apply the specification. And I think that this is a very important element for us. We are in a very unique situation in Europe, in the European landscape for rail, because we don't write the specification, but we coordinate the work and we propose regulation to the Commission for enacting, and then we see what is the result when the applicants come to us with the questions on what is the baseline, what does it mean exactly to implement the functionalities, the different baseline that we have implemented. I think that it gives us this unique opportunity to learn better where the issues are and how best we can help or work together with the sector to improve the situation. And for me, the big innovation, the game changer in the photo-away package is ERTMS trackside approval. I think that we have heard already, Maria already explained that. I think this is really an important element where we can help infrastructure manager to learn from the experience that other infrastructure managers have experienced and make sure that we don't repeat the same mistakes, and we make sure that every euro which is invested in ERTMS is invested in an interoperable system, because when you do trackside implementation, it will stay there for years, decades. So it's better if we do it right from the beginning. And in terms of innovation, regulation and innovation are a little bit at odds among themselves, because by definition, innovation goes to explore new areas. Fragmentation and deviation from the norm is the driving force for innovation, while regulation has to, I can say, restrict the possibilities that you have. I think in this case, the situation is still the same that we had, since the very wise legislator wrote in the directive on interoperability that TSI should define the optimal level of harmonization. And then what is optimal is the daily debate that we have with the expert in our working groups, with the sector. And I think that this optimal level of harmonization is something that can move and evolve. We have to make sure that we make use of all the possibilities that we have. In the presentation this morning on CORA or the Smart Rail, the value of company standards, voluntary standards, procurement specifications, or EN standards, in addition to what is requested in TSI or regulation, was highlighted, and I think this is collective discussions that we are having with the sector at large. And I think that one of the difficulties that we experience is that regulation cannot push innovation. We have seen situations where it's now since 2016 that we have baseline 3 in the specifications. We still have to see fully compliant baseline 3 released to onboard system, for example. So even the power of regulation to help innovation, I mean, is not sufficient that it is written in specifications in the TSI. We need to work on this together, and that was the reason why in the stakeholder platform that was a group created now in 2015, a few years ago, we aim to have directly the input from the decision makers, the CEO, the people in the stakeholder representative bodies, and in the supply and operating company, to give us the direction where we need to go in terms of investment and what are the necessary supporting regulation that we need to put in place. I think that this is really something that is absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you very much. The fourth railway package entered into force on the 16th of June of this year. And in fact, as you know, unfortunately, there are only 8 member states who decided to transpose. The other ones we have to transpose before next year, 16th of June 2020. So I'd like to ask Libor 2 or 3 questions. But the first question is, what is his impression after, because the 16th of June has been there for 4 months, the transposition, what does did he receive some specific message from his members? How do you view things about those first 4 months on authorizations, the issuing of safety single certificate, plus other topics? For what I hear on trackside approval, there's been not yet any decision taken by the... And so what is the view on the railway undertakings on this specific point?
Thank you, Philippe. I mean, I have to say that still it's a bit too young, although we have some vehicle authorizations that have been already granted by the agency or delivered by the agency as the authority in a successful way. I would still say that we are in a kind of the learning stage, so to have the full assessment, it's probably a bit premature. What we can say that there is definitely a success story with the transfer of the responsibilities with regards to the freight wagons, because now we have the authorization flatly across Europe through one single entity, and plus, of course, the other vehicles that are also subject to the authorizations in some member states on the basis of the application through the one-stop shop. But if you ask what can still be a slightly problematic is the new element in the four-way package with regard to the authorization of the vehicles and its difference between placing on market and placing in service. And this is what the companies will still have to somehow digest and prepare for that. And this is kind of also an interface between the vehicle owner / railway undertaking and the infrastructure manager, because we need to have also the register of infrastructure completed in all the cases, and we know that it's not the case yet.
So,
on both sides we know that's not the case. But maybe because you suggested at the beginning we should maybe also somehow be forward-looking. So if you ask me what needs to be done from that perspective, clearly if we talk about the CCS, what needs to be the drive is towards the cost reduction of the entire system. Because as the party representing the interests of the operating companies that are directly serving the customers, our interest is clearly to be more competitive. I mean, you heard it in the previous sessions and also from the panel of the European Commission represented by Henry Holley, the others. We should be more competitive, yes, but means that we need to use the technology that allows us to be more competitive. It means we are really reducing cost of what we use, what we have to implement, reducing cost, what we have to implement, reducing the operational cost, increasing capacity and performance. So that will be the point to that. And if I will have the chance in the second round to talk about the lessons learned from the previous workshops, I will be more than happy to do so.
Okay, so I don't know if, Monica, you want to add something on this implementation of fourth railway package to what Libor just said?
Well, we are a bit more in the second line, I have to admit, with ERTMS trackside, so it's quite new still. So we don't exactly know yet what it is. So we are still learning, in a learning phase. So I think the proof in the pudding is in the taste, so let's see how that will play out. So we are very happy to participate in the learning cases of the agency, that's quite important. And of course, what we will have to see also that over time we pick up the lessons and build on them from the ERTMS trackside approvals.
Okay, going back to Libor, thank you, because I just wanted to ask you two other questions. After that, I will ask you. It's about Libor, because of you have moderated some working groups. It would be good if in 2 minutes you could tell us more about the results.
As you wish, Philippe.
Yes, and then after that, there's another question. Maybe you will have Monica will have the same question. What do you think about the Okora initiative? Because on my side, this time I will not be the moderator, but I will take another hat. I would say I really think that there are a lot of initiatives, and sometimes you are a bit lost with all those initiatives unless you know exactly what will be the target of these different working groups. And my feeling is that the message that I pass to the Commission, say take the lead on these kind of things, becoming so complicated for this deployment of ERTMS, and it's important. You are having the lead, you have the agency, you have Citroën, but take the lead in order to be sure that there is a good coordination. But it would be good to have your views on this thing. First, on what has been said, your working group, and on Okora, it could say.
I will start with the workshops on authorization, which was followed by the session yesterday on the same topic, and whoever has been here yesterday for the session where the presentation was made about the authorization of the freight locomotives on hundreds of the freight locomotives knows very well what I'm going to talk about now, although it's not limited to freight locomotives only. So the key, I would say 5 key takeaways. First, there is a full understanding that we need to migrate is the onboard equipment first. I believe that's the positive message, and it just confirmed the whole line that we have been going through the whole conference. So that's where it's really understood and supported by both the operating companies as well as the infrastructure manager. But the second is strictly and strongly related with that. In order to achieve that, you really have to have the national plans for the ERTMS rollout. And I don't talk, just to be very clear, I don't talk about only a national implementation plans that notify to the Commission. That's not about that. It's really the plan that encompasses the rollout of the ERTMS both trackside and board in a, I would say, in a compatible way. And this is what is being mastered in a very good way in the Netherlands, but this is what we miss in the majority of the countries. So that's the second message. So let's have really the national plans for the compatible ERTMS rollout on a trackside and on board. The third one, it's obvious when you talk about that you need to have the good cooperation with all the parties that you have to involve. And since we have the agency not only as a system authority but also as the authorizing entity now, at the first place, keep the close touch with the agency with whatever needs to be delivered. Which brings me to the fourth key takeaway, and that's that all the future upgradability of the onboard equipment must be smooth, must really allow that we are not going to be in a situation of enforced replacement of the hardware, but rather talking about the software changes and rather talking about really backward compatibility issues that will enable us to continue operating the vehicle in service without much of the interruption. You may remember yesterday it was said that in the case of those locomotives under the NL retrofitting or upgrade program, the locomotives have to be 1.5% of the time ready for all the upgrade works and reauthorization, which is huge. And then the fifth one, and that's which closest to loop, is that to have positive, at least not to have the super negative business case for the operating companies. And again, what I said, to achieve and keep the competitiveness against the other transportation modes, especially the road, we need to have the external financing for that, for the onboard. Without that, we will not be able to move, or we will not see an appetite of the companies even to continue the business. And there is a huge risk that we will see, slipping the market share of the railways below the current 17% instead of having seen the increase up to what the initiative Railway Forward depicted up to the 30%. So this is really crucial, having the proper financing, which I said it should also be part of the plans for the ERTMS rollout in each of the countries.
Okay, so now that it seems that Brexit is going in the right direction, maybe the member states will be able to start the negotiation on the funding of the EU from 21 to 27, and there will be a good part for ERTMS.
We were just to that point. Of course, we all lobby for the MFF and CEF and also the Horizon Europe in that context. But I have to call here all representatives of the member states in the room and also those who are following, online. It's not that you can rely on the EU funding here. Mm-hmm. If you don't have, and these annual cases showed it very clearly, if you don't have the robust national financing, we are not going to succeed.
That's it. You need robust national financing and, of course, EU financing. Thank you very much for this precision. So, Monica, I will jump immediately to the question about how does EIM view this initiative, and especially the RCA initiative. How do you feel about those initiatives, and what could you tell us what is the view of your association?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to endorse what you said, Libor. That's where it's always the case. But funding we need. So on the national level and the European level, otherwise the Green Deal, you can wrap it up and go. So it will not work. So we need more infrastructure capacity. We need it also for onboards, for other things, for the rollouts, ERTMS deployment on the TEN-T. It's quite horrendous to achieve the 97% deployment on TEN-T by 2030. So we are 11 years away from that, or a bit less, and that's quite a challenge. Thank you very much, Philippe, for embracing RCA. That is one of our preferred subjects, as you can imagine. So we love it. Everything that brings us down with the costs, that creates a better business case, that gets unit costs down, that helps us with exchangeability and modularity, we love. And we have a real supply market. It's very important. I thought, when listening to all the presentations since I've arrived, it was quite interesting. I still wonder where the target system is. How does it look like? So we have RCA, we have ULINX, we have Smart Rail, we have Digitale Schiene in Germany, we have Okora, and we were wondering, how does this all talk to each other? And even more, who is steering all that? So the question of coherence is extremely important. So far we said, okay, we have national variants, the supply industry doesn't deliver, let's say, EU-wide interoperable solutions, but here we cannot blame the supply industry. If we go the wrong way or in different directions, we will never have an Esperanto. We will have just really done it to ourselves. So the red and the green lines are very important to be defined. And so I was wondering the whole way through since I arrived here, who's steering it? And I thought, wow, what about the agency? What about the full CCS system authority to give it to the agency? So not only bits and pieces, but really to steer it all. We had yesterday a very useful platform meeting, and also to embrace the game changers there. So I think we can even be a bit more ambitious on that one. So, and Henry Colilai said something very important, digitalization. It's the game changer. So everything will accelerate tremendously. So what we need also with the industry to have a much better cooperation on that one. And what we also need to see is the modularity and the exchangeability pouring down the entire system architecture until the subcomponents, the functional subcomponents, so everywhere. So, and I hope, Philippe, I can count on you to make this happen. Okay. And I'm happy to help you with that. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the words. Just it is true that Henrik this morning said the digital railways will rely on ERTMS, the development. That's what will be certainly at the heart of the future. Thank you for what you said, but I'm sure there will be some remarks from the other panelists. Michel, I think there's been significant technical and political steps been taken to accelerate the ERTMS deployment over the European Union and over the past years. However, it seems that there is still more to be done. What are the main areas of improvements? And secondly, could you say a few words about the necessity of having some cooperation with Shift to Rail on the future of the system of ERTMS?
Okay, thank you, Philippe, for giving me the floor. I think I will answer also making the link with workshop 1A and 1B, attended by almost 100 colleagues, and also session 1, because I would like to maybe to conclude on session 1, which was about deployment. And so first of all, before speaking about innovation, I think we should remind the first goal, deployment of the existing system, preferably, as it was said, radio-based signaling. So level 2, because this is a good basis to move to the next steps for the digital railway. So, and what we have seen is that, okay, to call Matthias' words, good, but can do better. And during session 1, we have given some examples of heavy deployment in some countries, so I think to be followed. But I would like to jump immediately on let's say, the main takeaway from the two workshops, which was about managing complexity, diversity. Josef was speaking about fragmentation. This remains a big problem. Big problem for the people having to tender, to realize projects, etc. And we have seen that through to the presentation. In session 1, we had 4 IMs presenting their deployment, 4 different solutions on the trackside with the same European system. We have been speaking about decommissioning of Class B, but we can speak also about the national variations of interlocking on the trackside. These are all the national flavors we have train-borne and trackside. And this is an example of complexity and variability that we have to reduce absolutely. And this was a key message from the colleagues during the 2 workshops. And there are simple examples where I think we can have actions. These are not big R&D things. Example, why not to have only one language to modelize the trackside? We have spoken about big data, but today we have different languages just for the same elements we have on the trackside to describe the trackside. We have subset 112, RailML, etc. Why not to do something about this? Just an example. People were saying we have to manage different maintenance tools. For example, the balise, which is, let's say, we have hundreds and thousands of balises on the field, but we have a lot of different programming tools. Why not to have only one type? And so these are about simple, maybe actions that we could deliver in the future to improve the system. But variety is also everywhere else in the process, and this is something we have to also to look for. Processes, standardization of processes. That's and we have seen that variety goes to initiatives, because we have seen also during this conference that we have many initiatives. This is diversity again. And during the workshop there was a link with human resources, because in fact we have scarce resources to deliver all those things. So if we do not optimize in fact what we are doing, we will die, because we will not have the necessary resources. And so this is something that we have to really to think about, and this was a message from the colleagues during the workshop one.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Pio, you want to react to the suggestions of Michel, Josef, a few words about this?
No, I think that suggestions are very much welcome, and to be honest, there was some discussions already in the past on simplifications, you know, of ERTMS and of some of the variety. I think that ERTMS was born with this original problem or quality to try to cope with the diversity of demands that we have all over Europe from different legacy, different ways of doing things in the railways. And now maybe we are in a more mature stage where we can try to start simplify the situation. But clearly it's not a simple discussion. I mean, this morning Enrico Rolai spoke about managed evolution, and Josef has pushed this concept of interoperability in time and space. I think whenever you try to limit the existing compatibility, we had this debate on, baseline 2, or what is the value of level 1, or when we will have a new release in 2022, how many different versions we should keep backward compatible. I mean, all those are very important elements. I mean, the protection of the investment that has been made is clearly a key, but at a certain moment we need to understand where we want to put the bar if we want to allow innovation. And as I mentioned, there is no single driving hand in Europe. It's not that the agency can decide we do like this, or even the Commission. I think that we really need to make sure that we have together a mature understanding of what is the best way to progress forward with the rail.
Okay, thank you. I see that Michel Rosen took the microphone, so maybe he wants to react. And I say a few words, I ask a question on the evolution of the future CCS system architecture is becoming a real hot topic. We saw that there is this conference. How the different stakeholders of the railway chain that you represent, and globally speaking, will all benefit from a common and shared new CCS system architecture? It's not an easy question, but it would be good to have your views on this.
Well, I took the microphone only because I thought the other microphone is there, and Libor thinks that we should have a lively debate afterwards, so I thought we should distribute the microphone. So can I get that one back? You have one? Okay, great. Okay, but coming back to your question, and maybe also reacting on a couple of things which I said.
React to the others.
I think I don't have to repeat everything which was already mentioned in session 5 this morning, because I would imagine that everybody was there. But I want to come back to one point. I asked a question to Stefan Schmid about, can you explain how smart rail relates to OCORA and RCA? And I said I would expect that he would have said smart rail is exactly the same thing as RCA and OCORA. It's a combination of the two. RCA is an initiative of the ERTMS Use Group and EU Links. That means that EU Links is an element of RCA. And I would like to make clear to everybody that these things are not just uncoordinated initiatives. These initiatives are all aligned with each other. And the very good, I'm a bit positive always. The good thing is that the Commission actually presents now a framework in which all these things would fit. And for me, if you look at all those different things, then I think it's like trying to bake a cake. We have the ingredients. We could make a wonderful cake. We just need to have the right recipe, and maybe we have to sort a couple of things out on which ingredients do we have to take first and later on, etc., etc. I think what we still do not know exactly, and what we have to discuss a little bit further, is that all the players have responsibilities and they have competences. And we have to think a little bit more about, with these responsibilities which they have and these competences which they have, which roles can they play? And I think that is, from my perspective, we're on the good way, but we need a couple of months more to really have that distilled out, and so that we can say, now we know exactly this is the way together how we will proceed. And that includes a role of a system authority, that includes a role for an organization which could help in developing the products, etc. And it also, of course, includes a very important role for the suppliers who actually have to make these wonderful products which actually should be coming out of this, and the role for the railways to define exactly what they need.
Okay, I think that Monica wants to react to what Michel just said.
Yeah, you want a lively debate, you can have it.
Okay.
I didn't want that. Liebe wanted it.
You wanted it. Oh, okay.
Always.
Always.
Okay, so please take the floor.
You have a comment or what?
Yeah, yes, let me talk. So Michel, I mean, it wasn't a criticism about a non-steering or something like that. I mean, I was so positive. I love this kind of stuff, of course. It's still weird to have it on the user side to develop it, but it shows a lot about what the suppliers are offering on the market, so it doesn't reflect what we need. But we need to be clear what is the final target system and bring it all together, because when you speak to Okura people, oh, I'm just Okura, I'm not RCA. If you do the same thing to the RCA people, oh, I'm just RCA, I'm not Okura. So, and sometimes they don't even know what the other ones are doing. So, as I said, we blamed a long time the supply industry for not delivering interoperable products and services. Now we're repeating the same errors, and we should stop there right from the beginning. And this is something that is extremely important, and that we bring it together to a clearly defined target system and for what kind of business case. It's very important. Once we have that, great.
Yeah, but Monica, I have to say that I don't think that the Okura people don't know what the RCA and ULINX about. They know it quite well, and vice versa. So they know each other.
Yeah, but when you speak to some people, that seem they are an exception to the rules.
They have to talk to right people.
Okay, so personally I think that it shows that it's certainly necessary to have the lead from someone on the Commission and the agency there to take the lead on these specific topics. Now we will go to the FRMCS before asking the audience for questions. So I will ask the first question from Michael Mikulandra. In fact, in the recent years, telecom companies have started massive investments in the 5G wireless networks. My question is how these investments concretely translate into the rail sector, and what is the current timeline for a smooth migration to FRMCS? Not an easy question, and I'm sure that a colleague from UIC will tell us more about the vision of UIC later on. So, Michael, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Philippe. So it's a difficult question. So how much time I have? No. So 5G investments, and we know all of us that on the public side, the public mobile operators have invested a lot into 5G. And not that they have now starting to deploy systems, they have invested upfront in the whole standardization and specification process. So within 3GPP, for example, they have done now for years a lot of efforts and a lot of work to come up with the right architecture, defining the functions, interfaces, and so on. And since FRMCS is based on 3GP to a large extent, we can leverage that also now for FRMCS. So a lot of work has already been done, actually is also in the process of being done at 3GP. That's kind of the investments we can take on, basically benefit of. Secondly, I think yesterday you heard also one key principle of FRMCS is the bearer flexibility. And bearer flexibility means you can have different radio technologies, but also different radio networks. And one of these networks could be a public mobile operator network. So it could be one, let's say, transport combined with our transports, offering then generic communication services to the railway applications. So that's another benefit where the rail sector could basically leverage the investments of the public operator side. So now I think to the more difficult part, migration timelines. So actually I would say it starts today, even maybe yesterday. I think everyone should think about what the right timeline is for introduce FRMCS. And FRMCS is not that we at one point put some base stations along the tracks. No, it's about planning it in advance, understanding the implications. And we all know, and we heard it many times, the onboard part will be the most difficult one and the most pressing one because it has to come first. So we need to start here and we have to have tangible results, specifications, aligned with all the architectural vision we have to really enable that onboard is ready once FRMCS is going to put live. We know that we have the TSI milestone, the 2022 milestone in front of us, and starting from there we can expect at one point the different infrastructure managers will start their tendering processes. So roughly from an industry, supply industry perspective, we expect that we see 2025 as the year where the deployments basically start. And basically that's the starting point where we have also this challenge of coexistence between the old technology and the new technology. But then when you ask how long that will last, that's kind of an open question because it always depends when different infrastructure managers start their deployment of FRMCS and how long they will run the deployment, but also how long they will keep GSMR alive. So basically that's the whole time frame, and we can easily expect that will take 10 years, maybe even 15 years, we don't know really. So the migration timeline is a really complex topic, but my advice is clearly everyone really should start today already with the preparation, and we mentioned it before, like the introduction of IP services is certainly a good step for preparation, to really start preparation right now, to be then at the stage where you're really ready to put the one switch on for FRMCS.
Okay, thank you. So now, Jean-Michel, so we're going to speak again.
Can I
okay,
2 points before?
Okay, but more or less you have the floor now because we wanted to know what will be the role of UIC in this.
Well, so
you can answer.
We have 2 hours? Or?
Okay.
So first, no, I would like to reinforce or to pick up two main points on what said Michael. Which are very important to me. First one, there was a lot of debates these last years about what should be FRMCS in terms of support of a standard from the mobility world. So and there was a debate with countries outside of Europe as well, because you know countries like Australia are looking at 4G in this, or India, or whatever. And sorry to say, but UIC is also looking at these countries, even if it is a European event. But I would like to reinforce today really that the target, and there is no question anymore, I think, the target is to go for 5G. There is a lot of mathematical arguments, a lot of political arguments to go that way, and so clearly it's important to say for the reason you gave, but others as well. So first of all, we go for 5G, which is a very important message. The second one I would like to pick up from Michael as well is about the onboard. I'm sharing this idea that the onboard is a key topic, and certainly the first one to be addressed in terms of deployments, because by essence it will not work if there is not an onboard. Okay, and that's why we define. I would say we launched an initiative we call the telecom, and I will make the link with what you said before. We launched the initiative of we call TOBA, Telecom Onboard Architecture, which is now well, I think, recognized in the sector, which is really to say for the future, we have the opportunity of a rupture. We have to see it as an opportunity, not as a problem. Okay, we have to do it. So let's do it the best we can. And so we had this idea to say, this is the time to change a little bit the rule of the game for telecom, and to try to see the future much more in terms of targets. We're speaking of targets, but to say we are not preparing for the next 3-4 years, but let's look at the horizon, if I can say, horizon. let's look at it. And that's why we went for this concept of having an onboard which is shared between actual, current, and future applications. And that's why it's very important, and I make also the link with what you said, we have to speak with Okora in this sort of a new concept, or starting concept. The difficulty we have, and that's where I'm sharing your concerns, I think Michel also sharing your concerns. We have a problem of timing in all these things. We have things that are quite advanced and others not at the same timing. And that's where we need to progress. We need to say at a moment of time, we need to define the objective at the end. It's absolutely necessary. If we go step by step, we will reproduce some mistake. Unfortunately, we have been doing in the CCS for the last 20 years. Okay? So the onboard is absolutely key, and the vision of the new telecom onboard architecture is to adapt as much as we can to the future things. And that's where there is a compromise, and there was a lot of discussion in the workshop on that. A lot of people say, we don't have to touch TCS. Yes, but we have to make a compromise between the management of the legacy and the vision of the future, because everything you will take on board to manage 120% of legacy will cause you problems for the future. You will have to pay the bill after. So that's the compromise you have to do.
Okay. Thank you. No more time to lose. That was Henrik.
So, Toba, it's a very interesting question.
Yes, I think that Libor wants to say something, and Monica as well, I think.
I was just attracted by this call, talk about the FRMCS and the future communication capabilities, because we heard a lot of discussion today about ETO, so how we can really boost business, how we can increase capacity, reduce the cost, which we are all calling for. How we should decommission the Class B system. But I will have one provocative question. In the context of the revision of the TSA in 2022, would be the most logical, at least, provocative, to decommission the first level 1, so that we can really migrate quickly to the new system that will be based on the communication, instead of talking about how do we decommission anything else. But this is the first thing that we can do on the European level, right?
Yes, I think that it's a discussion that we are having, honestly, and as I said before, it would be too easy if we can have a single directing hands somewhere in Europe that can manage the complete railway business. It's not like that. It doesn't function in this way. But it is true that this is one of the key questions that we are debating, not in the sense forcing anybody to renounce on the investment already made in level 1 or take away the lines that are there, but at least to make sure that all the future investment will go in the direction of a radio-based communication system, where we will gain a lot in terms of flexibility and possibility to integrate real additional functionality, making sure that we will have this backbone for the digital railways, and be easier because we can take into account the experience that in the radio world you have concerning the compatibility between different versions, maybe arrive this managed evolution that was mentioned this morning.
Okay, so
I can take your question.
Then we'll ask
I can take your question because it's quite
quickly.
an important one. Very
1
quickly.
minute, because I want to have questions.
So
from the audience.
we absolutely need to go forward now, because if we want, because this is the objective of some railway companies to start their first lines in FRMCS somewhere in 2025. So time is running, clock is ticking. So one of the first priorities to develop what we call a TOBA prototype. And there is somewhere two good news on that. First of all, we start to have quite a good view on three good news. One, we have a good visibility of what we have to do in terms of, we may have to incorporate things coming from other products still, but we are there. We're sharing with UNIFE quite a lot of things on that. Second good news is that the industry, and I think you will confirm, is behind the railway community there. They have ideas in order to develop these new products, but more than ideas, they are on the way to do it. And third of all, we have a vehicle to do it, which is the next call in Horizon 2020 to do this sort of prototyping. So let's try to go that way, and in terms of dating, let's take a date for 22, 23 to have maybe a first vision of what is this product. Okay. I'm speaking of product.
Thank you very much. So now we ask the audience if I'm sure there are questions. Feel free. We still have 7 minutes from what I see. So I don't know if there are remarks. I'm sure. I don't know if the Commission wants to say something or you want to take the floor. Just introduce yourself. There's a microphone. The lady is there. Okay, she's coming. Here. No, it's here. Okay, so we start with someone else, and you introduce yourself, and after that it would be...
Yes, my name is Josef. I'm from NS, Netherlands Railways, and I'm currently involved in Ocora, setting up Ocora. And I want to support Michel in stating that the cooperation...
Yeah, there are two Michel, so which one, the Dutch one or the Belgian one?
There is a lot of Michels.
Yeah, I know.
Be careful.
And the third one. Oh, half of it. Okay, so...
I am disappointed.
No, please finish your question.
There was some doubts about the cooperation between RCA and Ocora, and I can state here that we earlier already made agreements with RCA to collaborate on close accounts. Effectively, we will start next week. We have our first meeting to align our activities, and we will have some more after that. And what we intend to do is to act to the outer world with respect to architecture in one voice, because it's no use having something on the infrastructure side and the rolling stock side. The intention is very definitely to have something on the system level, because only that way we can come up with something that is coherent and consistent and can help us in the whole industry. Thank you.
Okay, so
You
it's
see,
more
Monica,
a
they really
declaration,
talk to
but
each
maybe
other.
you want to say something, to add something? No? You want to add something?
No, but they make me mad here. Thank you very much. So you are the proof that you are talking to each other. So that is, I hope you are not the only one.
Okay, so it's perfect. Thank you. So now
Not everything is limited to the Netherlands only, no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So a second question now, please.
Okay, Piero Pedruccioli from CR. Actually, Josh already explained what I have also in mind. So Ocora is seen from the RCA point of view as one device, no? So the train is something so a bit more complex than a device. So within Ocora we are trying to define and to specify the modules of that strange moving device. I have actually another little question, let's say little, to Michel Valli-Ferrange. Thank you, Michel, for addressing the need of using a single language for describing the trackside. And we are also more and more in this direction also for describing the new interfaces that are coming, but why not to use a single language, sorry, not English, something more formal, for describing the ERTMS as a system. We started, and you know very well, we started this development in 1989. There was still the walls in Berlin, long time ago. And when we started, we made a terrible original sin, let's say, and we are now observing the songs of the scene. Not having such a formal description since the beginning means that we are discovering more and more some inconsistencies and lack of coherence between the systems. So is it possible to do something
Michel,
better
can you
for
say?
the future system?
Thank you for the question.
Yes, thank you for your question on a subject which is always a bit controversial. But in fact, we are somewhere about, let's say, formalizing specifications. But as it was maybe said many times by PO, we are where we are in the RTMS specifications. And it's a bit difficult to restart from the beginning on this subject. But when we are speaking about the system of the future, I think, of course, we should use the modern methods to describe the system. I think it is obvious. But of course, to restart from the beginning on the current ERTMS specifications is a bit difficult. So this is my my best answer I can give on this subject.
I think
I would like to take the
yeah. Hello. David, take the floor, please.
David Brigginshaw, International Railway Journal. Firstly, as response to a question this morning, somebody asked when we were going to have the first automatic driverless freight train in Europe. Well, in Australia they already have that. It took quite a long time to get there. It's on the Rio Tinto network in the Pilbara of Western Australia. But, you know, it was done with a European supplier, Hitachi SDS, as a joint project. It took them longer than they expected, but they got there. And I think the reason they got there was that they were focused on the goal and they knew what they wanted to achieve. I think the problem in Europe is we make everything so complicated. You know, I've been observing ERTMS for, I can't remember how many years now, and every time I think I understand...
Don't say a number.
Every time I think I understand the subject, something else comes along, I think, no, I don't. There are so many bodies involved, so many people with different objectives. And I think the danger is in Europe, we make it so complicated that, you know, the technology is advancing outside or in other industries so quickly that it will pass us by and something else will come along. You know, the Chinese are developing very rapidly their own version of ETCS. The Russians are pushing ahead with automation. You know, there's so much going on outside of Europe, and we're busy discussing all these things amongst ourselves and not really making any progress. And I think this is something we need to think about.
Well, I will give the floor to the panelists. Just we had some good news in the past 4 years with the creation of Shift to Rail, which is quite a successful tool, and then on the fact that now we have the fourth railway package, so things have been progressing. But I agree with you, things are always a bit complicated in Europe. So I think Michel, quickly, because we have some other questions.
That's exactly the reason why Libor asked the question to Pio. Why don't we get rid of level 1?
Well, okay, so we take note of the
narrowing
and
down,
Michel quickly. Michel quickly.
Yes, I would like to add something on ETO, because just to be clear, ETO is available from each supplier since a long time. It's a current thing in CBTC systems. The problem we have here in Europe is due effectively to diversity. We try to reduce diversity by having an interoperable ETO. And by the way, we try also to standardize a number of interfaces in order to avoid the problems we have, and that we are moving to this modularization, the standardization, etc. This takes a little bit more time. So ETO is existing on Thameslink, but it's not interoperable, it's not fully standardized. But the good news is that grid of automation 2 ETO specifications are there. So we have still to work a little bit together, it's there. So we are ready. This is ready. Grid of automation 3 and 4, this is another story, because we are speaking about an automated network, an automated open network. Okay, so this is another story. Grid of automation 2 is there. This is the good news.
Okay, good news.
And maybe, sorry, the perfect example, David, because Rio Tinto is one company that owns the track, the trains, the complete process, and they can do it, and they have a business case to do it. In Europe, the rail landscape is much more complex or rich, depends how you want to see it, and there cannot be one single balance sheet for all over Europe. But yes, it's a challenge that we are trying to take up with cooperation.
But we have a driverless
I have to say
network
that,
for quite a long time.
as was said by Michel, we have in fact the A2 up to the great automation 2 in various places, and we have a positive experience because it reduced the, I would say, the unpunctuality, it reduced the energy consumption, so it definitely improves the services. But we have to accept also that we don't work in a closed system, like the metro is.
Like for the metros, for example.
Like, for example, in Australia, but it's really more isolated, so we have to accept also these constraints.
Okay, Monica, and will be...
Thanks for the challenge, you're absolutely right. So we liberalized first, and then we figured out what it did to the market. We should have done it the other way around, or we didn't do it because we thought too easy would be too simple, so we do it now the complex way. But we now have the agency that will solve a lot of problems. And we have, let's say, a gradual move to, okay, we know we have to do something. Let's say we are now not walking, we are just running now, and we try to bring all the systems together. So maybe in 5 years' time, ask the same question and we'll say we did it.
Okay, I don't know if there is a last question there. Okay, take the microphone, please. And then we'll close the session.
Peter Willems from the Netherlands. I heard the word time to market. And if you observe the presentations held this morning, we're talking about from innovations and then to get it spread throughout Europe, it easily will take between 10 and 15 years. And that's relatively long for an innovation in the digital age. By the time we start to use ERTMS, the chipsets will not be available anymore, where the 5G at this moment is in my pocket already. So I think this becomes partly, and Guido confirmed that, we are building to specifications. Building to European specifications whereby the time needed for the first idea, have it in the TSI, and then products available on a mature way takes more than 10 to 15 years. What we need is to have a solution, an answer for the operators within 5 to 6 years.
Okay.
So I would like to ask Michel from UNIFE, how are you going to solve this?
Just 30 seconds to answer.
This is the killing question.
Okay. Or maybe you could answer quickly and after that, because we have to now the closing session, or you want to say?
I think that you are perfectly right that effectively we have to take care that the time to market the innovations are too long. So I don't have magic answers about that, but it means that we need parallel processes. If we put everything into series, then we will effectively not reach the goal. It was said by Jean-Michel, in fact, let's take FRMCS. It means we have today to start planning, prototyping, testing, etc. if we want to have the product available around 25, 26. But if we wait that we have fully finalized the specifications, then it will take 10 years. And so it's a matter of organizing, I think, here the industry.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have to close the session. I just want to say one last word. We spoke about the very important things concerning, of course, the new role of ERA on forced railway package, track side, about FRMCS, competitiveness. But there are two important things. It's in the next future is the discussions about the budget, because without a budget we will not be able to do anything. And don't forget to support Shift to Rail 2. It would be very important in the next future to have a big support for all the people who are in this room. And thank you very much for having attended this meeting. And thank you for the panelists. Thank you.
We still have a lost and found mobile.
So, now we are coming closer towards the end of our almost 3 days conference, and I am now very pleased to introduce to you our CEO panel. And let me first introduce our participants, and I start with Ms. Isabel Pardo, CEO of ADIF, the infrastructure manager in Spain. Welcome, Isabel. Then from the right, we have Patrick Chanté. He is the CEO of SNCF Réseau, the infrastructure manager in France. Then on my left here, we have Karl Alexi. He is the Associate Administrator and Chief Safety Officer of the Federal Railroad Association in Administration in the US, based in Washington. Welcome, Karl. Then we have, as representative of the industry, Danny Perna, the CEO, President of Bombardier Transportation. And last but not least, we have Henrik Hollelai, Director General of DG Move, whom you have already met earlier this morning. Welcome again, Henrik. Now, we have been talking a lot today about the evolution of ERTMS and the importance of ERTMS for the future of the European railway system. The format of this session now is that each of the panelists will now have time for a short 2-minute statement, and then we will play back the questions from Slido. We do the voting, and on the basis of your priorities, we will then have a panel discussion on these questions. So again, I start in the order from right to left. Patrick, if you want to briefly start.
Good afternoon to everybody. So on SNCF Réseau, what we are living now is a major modernization campaign, which is certainly one of the major ones since the last 40 years. Since, let's say, we have set up our high-speed line system in France. And this modernization is fundamentally based, obviously, with ERTMS level 2, but it's much more than that. It's the digitization of all the blocks which make the system. So it's the interlocking, it's a traffic management system, and it's also, obviously, the control command of the trains. So that is a fundamental revolution we are living. And that is our key project for the future. Second point, that is being done on the existing network, which is quite different from what we have done in the past, let's say 10 years, where we have launched new lines with ERTMS2 as a greenfield project. Here we are on the existing network, and therefore one of the major constraints is obviously that we have not to stop in train, and we have to continue to operate the existing system while we are doing this modernization. So for us, it's not only about innovation in each block, it's much more about integration of all the blocks. Point one. And point two is close works with industry. Because if we want, and we will talk about financing later, if we want to finance not only the first 1,000 kilometers of lines, but the whole system, then we really need to lower the price step by step. And so that is one of the major challenges we have. So here more or less 3 points I would like to put in forward.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Patrick. Danny, what is the perspective of industry?
Okay, great. First, let me just make a little introduction.
Please.
So I'm relatively new to the rail industry. I spent 28 years in aerospace, but I'm very pleased and honored that you asked me to be part of the panel. I do head up Bombardier for the last 7 months. I was told that there's roughly 500 people here with 5,000 years of experience on average. I have the same number of years of experience, 5,000 hours. So I am equally ERTMS proficient. I would say that exciting industry, very complex, much more than I ever imagined. I thought jet engines was very complex until I started to learn the world of serving customers in the railroad industry. And at the heart of some of that complexity is the signaling system. And it's an applause for the effort here in the European community to have a standard. But in all the benefits that everybody knows in terms of interoperability across country, agnostic to train manufacturers or companies that are in signaling, cost benefits from an infrastructure, flexibility, technology, all of that is key and is the reason why there's a resounding need for ERTMS and a single standard, which you're pushing. However, I like the bake the cake analogy that was done at the last panel. You know, this is a very complex system. It's extremely costly. If I take the supply chain view from the customer voice, the customer needs riskless, new systems, new trains, added capacity, and passenger comfort, and in the digital moving world, they don't want to deal too much. Maybe the infrastructure guy likes it, but I can assure you every one of my customers wants a fast, quick, developed, meet all the 2,645 requirements, both signaling and train control, and get on with it. So on one hand, having a single standard that we can all work to here in the European community, even amongst our friends between myself and Siemens and Alstom and Thales and others, would be a good thing. But there's multiple cooks that are baking that cake. And so there's an added complexity in terms of how we work and collaborate with each other. But ultimately, I think the point that was made, and I'm going to be very polite because I was born in Europe, but I have European blood, we are working too slow. And you could see the rest of the world, this Australian example in China, they're leapfrogging ahead of us. So we need a one and done. I think the ultimate method of bringing everybody together, this fantastic 2022 TSI, come up with the standard, set the target for phasing in and possibly phasing out some of the Class B 30 plus different systems. I think the whole industry would benefit, which I know you know. So the question is, could we work together to go faster and do what you already know is the right thing to do?
Thank you very much for these very concise and focused statements. I'm sure we will come back to some of the aspects in the course of the discussion. Isabel, what is the perspective from ADIF?
Good afternoon, thank you. I would like to start by saying that from Spain, from the we share the vision of the European Commission in relation to the strategic importance that the deployment of the ERTMS system has on the achievement of a single competitive rail space in Europe. A system which is meant to be fully interoperable and based on iteration. But with this in mind, I would like to take the opportunity to recall down from my point of view, Spain is one of the member states that have made the biggest efforts in this deployment, working from very early on the introduction of the system in our high-speed lines, such as the early setting up in service of the ERTMS Level 1 system on the Madrid-Lleida high-speed line on the 15 May 2006. Since then, the installation of the ERTMS on lines that are part of the corridors of the basic European railway network and the global European railway have followed an adequate pace of deployment with a total length of railway lines that are currently equipped with the ERTMS being 2,184 kilometers. This figure demonstrates our clear and firm commitment to the deployment and development of this interoperable signaling system. But the migration of ERTMS versions currently in way of being completed has been a great challenge both technically and economically. As I mentioned it, and in addition, it should be noted that despite the enormous effort made, in Spain has not been able to obtain a clear competitive advantage in relation to the creation of a single railway European space. With regards to cross-border traffic, it's evident that there is a lack of advantage when we analyze the limited ERTMS network that is planned to be deployed by the year 2023 by our immediate neighboring countries, even in the main European corridors and cross-border sessions. While being here, I would like to take advantage of the opportunity of this meeting with my friend colleague from CCRCC to ask him about this plan and the completion of the corridors, as France is our gateway to the heart of Europe.
Yeah, so many thanks, Isabel, and I take up specifically the last point because connecting the European countries, breaking down the barriers will certainly be one of the key tasks, and we will certainly come back to that. Henrik, what is your introduction to this panel?
Thank you very much, Josef, and very interesting to listen also what colleagues have said. And obviously, well, indeed, I already earlier had a quite lengthy speech, so I think quite a lot of things were said there. But obviously, we are focusing very much here on the deployment of the ERTMS, on the rolling out of the digital solutions, and also making sure that the rail sector is well equipped also to move forward and to try to start reaping the benefits from the solutions which have not been there before, and by that also optimizing its operations, increasing the efficiency, and very importantly interoperability. But in a way, one can also, and of course that should also make a difference, and it will make a difference, it will make a big difference, there is no doubt about that. But one should also look back and see, why we are also in a situation where we are today, where we are still not at all satisfied of the role that the rail sector is playing, meaning that the share of rail freight is not going up. Rail could also take more on the passenger side, and rail could be even plugged in much better to the other transport modes, and by that, of course, being in the forefront of the real multimodal solutions. And I think these questions are equally important, because the deployment, and even the fastest deployment of the ERTMS, will solve some, but it doesn't solve many of the problems which are related to the old-fashioned thinking, which is related to the protectionism, which means that you cannot offer services on the other side of the border. And I think that these aspects need to be addressed equally and rigorously. The implementation of the fourth railway package is that extremely important, because that is what is helping to tear down the barriers. This is also the way how we could really have a genuine single European rail area which can operate from one part of Europe to the other, at least as long as the tracks are, or the gauge is the same, and also to see the interoperability beyond. And this is where a lot of the focus has to be, because even with the best signaling system, you cannot break down those barriers if there are those who don't want them to be broken down. And also if there are those who don't want that there is more competition in the rail market. And I believe that this is something where also the change has to happen, and only then we would be fully reaping the benefits that digitalization and the deployment of the ERTMS are going to give to us. And of course, I think we have made some really important leaps forward, and one of those is related to the regulation, to the way how we have also simplified and have changed the obsolete rules, or basically got rid of the obsolete rules, so that the number of those rules have come down, and it is also much more easier and more likely that the cross-border services can be offered, and that this sector is not overwhelmed with the regulation very often, most of the time, the national regulation, which has been put a disproportionate burden. So, in a way, I would say that now it's time to change. Rail sector is going through a period of renaissance. I believe that the rail sector can really contribute a lot to the way we are changing our habits in terms of mobility and also in terms of transporting goods. But that would require that it brings itself fully to the future and changes somewhat the mindset and deploys the new solutions which are there to make the sector more competitive.
Thank you very much, Henrik. And now, Carl, you have been following our conference actually since Tuesday, and I have two questions to you. First, what is your impression so far? And then, secondly, how do you look at the situation in Europe from the perspective from the outside, and how do you compare the situation in Europe to the situation you have at home in the United States?
Well, I was going to, as I was doing my introductory statement, I was going to say that, well, first let me say this. I'm so happy to be here. I didn't know much about ERTMS and what was happening in Europe. So I've learned an awful lot this week. The major takeaway for me is that I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell everybody how easy we have it in the States, and that there should be absolutely no complaining, and meeting deadlines should not be a problem. So I'll certainly send my regards to all the railroads.
And we can send you some of our complexity.
Yeah. No, you can keep that, I'm thrilled to be here. I just want to say I'm accompanied by a couple of colleagues, Michael Listingi, who's the Director of the Office of Policy and Planning, and Barbara Kleinbar, the Director of International Programs. So this is a great opportunity for us to come over and again, learn what's happening here, and to collaborate and certainly learn from the struggles that are happening over here. I thought as introductory remarks I would talk a little bit about our situation in the States, just so as background to give you some perspective of where I'm coming from. As you know, we have a congressional safety mandate to implement our version of ERTMS, which is called Positive Train Control, or PTC. And the requirement is for that PTC to be implemented by December 31st of next year. We are implementing over passenger lines and also the lines that carry certain amounts of dangerous goods. So when I talk about implemented, I mean the railroads have to be interoperable, which means the different PTC systems have to be able to communicate with one another as equipment traverses from one railroad infrastructure owner to another. And they have to have a certification. Now, certification is an approved safety plan, and that safety plan is basically a risk analysis that has to be done. And based on the safety that the system provides, you can have a non-vital overlay, a vital overlay, a mixed system, and standalone. So non-vital is basically this system will prevent 80% of these types of accidents. And I'll talk about what those accidents are in a moment. And a vital is there is some very long mean time between hazardous events. And again, I said this was a safety mandate because that's the primary point of this. It's to prevent overspeed accidents, train-to-train collisions, work zone incursions, and incorrectly lined switches, or a train hitting an incorrectly lined switch. So those are the four types of safety issues that this system is meant to prevent. Now the status, We have 58,000 miles that are required to have PTC implemented by the end of next year. We're about 50,000 miles now. We have 22% of all the host-tenant relationship interoperability. So that means, so those systems are talking to one another. There's a total of 232, and we've got 50. We have 41 railroads that are required to have this implemented by the end of next year. 13 have conditionally certified, 13 are under review, and 25 have yet to request certification. So we have a lot in front of us as far as that goes. And so far the government has provided $2.6 billion in grants to support implementation of PTC in the United States. And finally, I'll just wrap up by saying that, looking to the future, and some of these may resonate with you all, how are we going to think about the future of PTC? How are we going to pay for the maintenance? What's this going to do to network capacity? The continuous adaptability, increased functionality, open architecture. Right now, the architecture is so closed and it's proprietary, and that seems to be hindering some advancements. And finally, communications limitations. So some of those things I've heard loud and clear here this week. So we've got our share of challenges, but again, like I said, nothing like you all. So,
well, thank you very much. From my perspective, I believe the technical challenges are similar that we have, specifically the maintenance and the upgradability. The institutional challenges might perhaps be a bit more tougher on our side. Now, after the introduction, I would like to ask Antonio to do a final question to you, to ask you to use Slido so that we can identify the questions that the audience would like to ask the panelists. Antonio.
So far we have 125 of you who voted, plus some externals who are following us via our live streaming on YouTube. And I think we can close the voting now. The most voted questions actually are
So it is better.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I would say that half of our audience would like to know, how do you see the future of railways and the future of automation and train control systems?
Yeah, and the second one is, what could be the contribution of your organization? Unfortunately, this first question appears to be very close to the introductory statements that you have already made, but nonetheless, I believe we can perhaps add a few more aspects to it. Who from the panelists wants to start? Yeah, Patrick.
You can start by the right. You would like to.
Yeah.
Okay, it's very clear that I think with the digitalization of our systems, we are living a third revolution in the railway industry. The first one was electrification of our system in the 30s and, let's say, massively in the 50s. There we have the high-speed train, at least in France, and some other countries like Spain, for example, or Germany. And now we are with the digitalization system in the third revolution. And this is key because today it will be more and more difficult to build new lines. You know, we take the example of the train, high-speed train between Paris and Lyon. It's completely saturated now. And if we want to go further, that means we want to deploy more trains, because trains is the solution today to climate change, is very well welcomed by all our clients or the populations. And if we want to do more now, we have no choice. Either we increase the capacity of the existing lines, or we build a new line. Building a new line today, it's 20 years minimum, plus a lot of discussions, debate, impact on environment. That means we have, for example, computed the fact that the neutral carbon point with train when you build a new line is 18 years. Because when you build, you have greenhouse gases which are which are emitted. And when you operate, you avoid some people taking cars because they do train. So that's positive, but it's 18 years. When you renew and modernize with the ERTMS, it's 4 or 5 years. So you see it's a solution. So I see great future with digitalization. The point is the financing of it is not totally self-financed, and we need to have additional financing. So thanks to EU, we have some. Thanks to our government, we can have some, but we have to convince our government to go for this. Because, you know, when you go a new line, politically speaking, it's very, very, very valuable. When you integrate a new system, it's much more complex. So you have to convince them. And to convince them, you have to take the perspective of our clients, ultimate clients. That means our citizens, which are also voters, by the way. And so, and for that, we have to explain what digitalization can bring to them. So it's additional capacity, but it's much more than that. It's a much better quality of service. Let's be clear on that. Today, we are the produce of our history, and we have thousands of prescriptions, very detailed and complex, as you were saying, procedures. With ERTMS, I think we are going to simplify that. And that, I think, is the main message. We have to talk with you, with ERA, to see how we can have much more simplified procedures to operate our trains. Because simplifications means better quality of service after that. On the same, on the safety point of view, today we are multiplying the number of systems to ensure a better safety of our system. With the ERTMS, it's much better because we know the braking curve exactly, and therefore we can have a much better, much safer system.
Yeah. I again want to underline the keyword simplification. We heard it several times during that conference, but I believe this is clearly one of the objectives that we need to pursue in the future. Danny.
So just a couple of key points, not to repeat, and I don't think you copied any of mine. If I think long term, you know, pretty simple. Simple statements. No more wayside. The wayside goes by the wayside.
Yep.
Trains talk to trains. No more borders. It's not an immigration discussion. No borders. Seamless stitching across all of the Eurozone, kilometer by kilometer by kilometer. One standard, universally accepted, ERTMS, level 3, level 4, Freudian slip there, Freudian slip. That would be, you know, and I think from a European perspective, you know, we should continue debating openly, but we must quickly, collectively commit and get on with it, which I know how long, that's where the last time we met, before the vegan dinner, you wanted that. I think the challenge, though, is there's a lot of parties involved. You could see even today our customers are getting together in a gang over there, and you've got some other folks over there, and then you've got the commission, and there goes my notes, and you've got the commission, and then you've got us. Thank you. Gracias. Then you've got us as the supply chain players, my friends in the other countries. And the challenge is now we're talking about commoditizing the entire signaling technology. So it's no longer necessarily a business comparative or competitive advantage, which today is a little bit of niche playing. So I'm not saying it's insurmountable, but folks have been investing millions, probably hundreds of millions. And so now, you know, we're going to want to hold on to our toys. So I think that's an added challenge. Short term, I think we should support what you're doing. Adopt the ERTMS level 2, baseline 3 as fast as possible, move on to block control level 3. You were right, ensure the rules are simplified, 14,000 down to 1,000. Sounds like a great progress, it's good. And make sure that backwards compatibility, to avoid what somebody presented today, you did, that circle of death of investment, because eventually business people will never continue to fund. Last thing I'd say from a future, you know, certainly battery technology, whether it's hydrogen battery, green technology for trains, and the world of digital and big data, which was on your slide, using predictive maintenance to help our customers reduce their total cost of ownership. I think that's where the future of big data and digital is going to go. So single brains on trains that communicate together seamlessly. You analyze the data, you tell him he's going to have a bearing problem, you pull over to the depot, you repair it. He doesn't even notice interruption during the night. I think that's where we're going.
Many thanks, Danny, and I am sure that our communications department have taken some note of some of the slogans that you brought, because I believe we can use some of these.
License fees.
Well, brains for trains I did when I was working for your company, so we can exchange license fees. No, but coming back to one keyword that you mentioned, commoditization, and I think we are not yet there. The challenge now is actually industrialization, because we are now going from bricolage, as the French say, into a real industrial product, and then we will come into commodities eventually. And of course, this will change the business model for the suppliers as well as it will change the business of the infra manager. Isabel, from Ali's perspective.
From public administration. Currently, we are facing three major challenges. Challenges that at first sight could be interpreted as weakness, but from which genuine opportunities may open for our sector. And of those challenges that are posed to ADIF as a level of the economic activity of the country is to alleviate its financial situation, since today it has a high debt. However, in our determined commitment to passenger transport by rail, with the underutilization and the liberalization process, we will generate new revenues that help reduce this deficit. In addition, with this generation of demand, we will capture market share from other more pollution means of transport, which would lead to a double benefit financial and environment. But we cannot forget the low impact of rail freight transport that moves nowadays only in span 4% of the total freight across the country. ADIF must work jointly with the EU, because even though we electrify all the lines, improved the rail activity, continue to perform improvement actions and providing them with competitiveness. The impact on CO2 emissions will be now given the low share of rail freight transport. Yeah. So it's a challenge, but we need help. We need help for Europe and from the other countries, because if with this challenge and with these opportunities, it's not possible to increase the freight transport by railway. I think it's not true where I was talking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, coming back to what you said on freight, and I fully subscribe to this, a market share of 4% you mentioned in Spain 4%. Is indeed too low, and in few of the challenges we have with greenhouse gases, with emissions, we drastically need to improve the market share. Average European market share, EU 28 or actually 26, because only 26 have a railway, is 17%. And Carl, remind me, what is the market share of rail freight in the US?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but it's almost inverse of what it is here in Europe.
Yeah. Well, it's at least 50%, I would guess.
Yeah.
So, of course, coming back to the introductory statement by Carl, one of the reasons why the market share US is higher is, of course, because you have long distances, you have one regulation and not 50 state regulations, so you have less complexity. But I believe Spain is, on the other hand, a role model, because you have already demonstrated that on the passenger side, with the high-speed lines, you can take off passengers from aviation. I believe Madrid-Barcelona, nobody takes the plane anymore. It is now entirely on the high-speed line, and we had Commissioner Bulc here on Tuesday, and she was stating her vision that we should have all major cities in Europe connected by high-speed line, so as to avoid unnecessary air travel as much as possible. Of course, that means that the quality of rail needs to be there, that connection needs to be there, and that we need to have a good interconnection with aviation. Henrik, what can we learn from aviation? I know that aviation is a topic that is very close to your heart, and what lessons can rail learn from some of the experiences in the aviation field?
Thank you. It's a very interesting question, Josef. Well, first of all, one of the biggest achievements that Europe has delivered to its citizens is the single European aviation area, which has made flying affordable to tens of millions of people who wouldn't have otherwise afford travel and who wouldn't have had the opportunities to see further distant places in Europe and, you know, visit to make friends, whatever. This is something which is missing in railways, and we are talking about it. I keep on talking about it. Single European rail area. The only way how it was achieved in aviation was to take down the barriers, stop the national protectionism, and stop the national rules, and have them on the European level, and see Europe as one market as it is in the single market. In rail, there is still some way to go. And also, if I have to see where we are in the future, then in the future we have to be there so that the rail would be able to reap these benefits. I also believe that one of the important advantages that aviation has been the accessibility to data, and in particular the data concerning departure, arrivals and so on. Again, something which we are still struggling. I said it also in my speech, we shouldn't be struggling with this. It is natural. But even now when I talk to travel agencies or metadata search companies, whatever, they all say that it is very difficult to get information about the rail timetables, it's very difficult to get the information about the arrivals and where the trains are at a specific moment. Well, if that's possible with the aircraft, it's also possible with the rail when we talk about the passengers. But it's the same is about the freight trains, and also the understanding where they are and what is the punctuality and also the reliability. You talk to the logistics companies and you very often say, okay, putting some containers on a truck might be more expensive and more polluted, but at least I know where it is in the other end where I want it to be. And also trying to solve the last mile problem. We have talked about it a lot of time, and there are obviously solutions. And that means also that the future of the rail sector very much depends also how it will plug itself in the overall multimodal travel network. And to see it as part of the overall travel solutions, transport solutions, and not something which is separate, different, and on its own. And that actually concerns all the transport modes that we have in Europe. They all have to work much more together, and there will be much more interaction. And I'm sure that also new solutions which are coming are also helping to solve the last mile problems, be it, for example, the drones and clearly sort of other ways of moving goods. But for that you need data. For that you need to be plugged in the multimodal system and see yourself as part of the system and not separate from the system. And you have to have the reliability and an open market. Now, all that would also lead to a big challenge, a challenge which I alluded to all of you during my speech, but something that you are well aware of, and many of you also feel it already on a daily basis, and that is the capacity issue. And there again, there is a huge resemblance when I look at the aviation sector. They are struggling with the capacity issue today, but it is going to become even more challenging in the future, particularly the capacity on the ground. When I look at the rail system, exactly the same thing. If people would use more rail, if there will be more freight on the rail, the infrastructure is not going to become bigger. The thing is that digitalization, we know, helps to use the existing capacity in a more efficient way. And that gives us sort of a little bit of breathing space. But you also most likely would need new infrastructure. And this is something which is very difficult in Europe today to make happen. To build a new railway, even to build new tracks. There is quite a lot of resistance to any kind of infrastructure construction. And even though when we talk about the rail, it is one of the most sustainable transport modes, if not the most sustainable transport mode, and still you have a lot who believe that this sort of building of new infrastructure is a bad thing. But rail will also be facing that problem, and it will happen sooner than later. And already today we know that especially in those areas where you have significant bottlenecks, the reliability and the throughput is jeopardized. And the last point I want to make is, of course, the sustainability point. Yes, rail is doing very well, and I think this is one of the big advantages of the rail, especially today when we are trying to move towards, say, less carbon emitting society, if not even to a carbon-free society in the more distant future. And of course rail is well electrified in Europe. That is helping, but I also believe that the transformation which takes place in replacing the diesel locomotives will need to be intensified, and I'm sure that, or I believe that the hydrogen fuel cell solutions will become much more common in the rail sector of the future. But again, building on and carrying forward the sustainability credentials is very important for the rail sector to continue to play a significant role.
Thank you very much, Henrik. And with your statement regarding capacity, you have of course mirrored what Patrick said at the beginning. We have had the key topic for this conference, ERTMS, as the motor of the digital rail for the future, and clearly looking at the figures that Patrick presented, it is usually taking much less time to improve the service and capacity by investing into technology such as ERTMS than building a new line, not to speak of the problems you mentioned that we already have in the aviation sector. Now, Carl, 2 questions to you, because our question actually contains another keyword, which is automation. And we already had the discussion before, and we heard the example of Australia. How is the situation and the way of thinking in regard to automation in the US?
So, and I know the question is about automated train operations, and I'm going to come to that, but automation is happening throughout the rail industry, and it's probably happening here as well. Automated rolling stock inspections and track geometry and rail inspections have done a lot for the railroads. It is certainly they're better inspections. They catch more than what the human inspector finds. And it keeps the human inspector out of harm's way. And again, PTC is all about safety, obviously efficiency, and network capacity comes into play. But the way we look at this is about safety. So now we have better inspections and we have less risk out there, which means implementation of PTC when they come in for approval of their safety plans and any amendments to their safety plans, being able to demonstrate that they have this automation gets PTC approved, and they're starting to look at automation. So there are fuel efficiency modules that I'm sure are used all around the world, and we have a couple of railroads that have approached us looking at hooking up PTC and the fuel efficiency module to what they call a 0 to 0 program, where they're looking to have automated operations. But they're going to go slow, but it is something they're certainly thinking about. It's on the horizon.
It's on the horizon over in the US. And again, I'm grateful for mentioning also the aspect of fuel consumption, because this should be one of the benefits of ATO as well.
Yeah.
Now, I would briefly like to cover the second question again, and we have 15 minutes left, so I would like everyone to give me a brief statement in 2 sentences, and the question is, what is the key contribution of your organization in order to support the effective deployment of train control systems? So what can SNCF Result do to deploy train control systems quickly and efficiently?
Okay, for the time being, we have equipped 1,000 kilometers of the system, of the lines, which mainly on high speed. We are currently, we have two projects going on now, one on high speed with Paris and Lyon, which is 400 kilometers more, and one in Paris, which is what called the EOL project, which is west to east of Paris, with it's an automated system, it's a semi-automated system, I would say. So that is what is existing now. One point I would like to put forward is that we have now to set up ERTMS and digitalization in our classical lines, because high-speed train is a category of clients. But we have people who take trains every day to do work, and they don't take high-speed trains to do so except businessmen. And so we want to equip Marseille to Nice and Ventimiglia. And that is a different setup because it's an existing line. On this existing line, what is very interesting, our first study shows that very clearly, is that if you put ERTMS in the station, then you have a huge gain of capacity. Because the station are the nodes which complexity on which we have a problem in terms of capacity. Obviously, to set up ERTMS, it's not only ERTMS, it's also a renewal and retrofitting of interlocking and things like that. In this station, it's much more costly. And so it's not uniform. On the other side, we have the savings of stopping the lateral signaling system, historical system, which is very costly to renew. So we have a savings, which is important. But basically, our main point here is including the station. But when you do that, you set up the whole rules of operating in the station. But obviously, it's a more higher investment cost for that. So that is I would say, our future challenge, and we are starting this project in terms of preliminary design now, and that is, for us, the key challenge for the coming future.
And I believe you are not the only infrastructure manager that is faced with that challenge, because I believe to fit in the brownfield the existing stations is one of the challenges that we have ahead. Now, from the supply industry, Danny, what can you contribute?
Yeah, so very succinctly, I'll be very brief. So from Bombardier Transportation, we are one of the leaders, in TCMS and RCS development certification systems. We have over 25, our contribution is we have over 2,500 professional system and software engineers. More than 50% of them are here in Europe that every single day are trying to implement either PTC in New York City or the ERTMS worldwide, plus every other country that we do business in. We have actually certified over 4,000 train cabs utilizing the ERTMS system. Unfortunately, the predominant majority of those are outside of Europe. And we're one of the first to develop the level 3 block control ERTMS in Sweden. So we are contributing. Richard Hunter is here. He has an insatiable appetite to keep adding more and more and more engineers, which is one of the reasons why I want to plea with you all to nail down this standard so we can make this much more standardized, more boss of rail, because for 30 years it was jet engines and aircraft. Now I'm the boss of rail, so I try to get my wife and kids on the train all the time. But to the point you're making, so I tried to go from London to Toulouse to go biking. And when you go online, it was 3 times the time, 3 times the cost to do the Eurotunnel to Gare du Nord, and then from Paris down to Toulouse. Would have arrived from 7 in the morning, would have arrived at 6 p.m. I flew British Airways, unfortunately, anti-greenish a little bit, within an hour and a half, 2 hours later on the bike. So I think not the complexity, it's a bad word, but the cost effectiveness of these network, the connectivity. I was thrilled. I couldn't wait to get the family on the train. No. So cost, I know I want to be like the entrepreneur. I'm not like that. I think the green of the planet is far going to outweigh the money we're talking about. But people want to book a flight or book a train system. You're right. We just got to make it stickier and a little bit more attractive.
So the key word here is the competitiveness of rail versus other modes of transport. And one aspect clearly is the ease of firstly buying a ticket for such a complicated international relation, and then of course guaranteeing the connections, because then on top you had to change the station in Paris, I assume. So we need to make rail more accessible. Now, Adif, what are you planning to contribute in order to speed up the deployment of train control?
Well, as I have explained before, I firmly believe Spanish infrastructure manager is firmly committed with the creation of an interoperable European railway space. In addition, due to certain particularities of our network, for instance, mixed gauge tracks, we are developing solutions that could be valid for other European countries. Spain's commitment to introduction of ERTMS is questionable. This commitment, in addition to the investment for undertaking, has been accompanied by an additional effort aimed at creating optimum conditions for facilitating deployment. To that end, ADIF has worked jointly with industry, involving all suppliers in ERTMS deployment, as well as in the analysis and solution of encountered incidents of discrepancy in the application of the specification. It's true that this technological heterogeneity has highlighted certain problems due to its proprietary system having more particularities than those expected. Derive from the interpretation of a specification, questioning interpretability to a certain extent. On the other hand, from a technical point of view, it has gone out of its way to minimize technological barriers to the introduction of the system, aligning itself with European regulation. In turn, it has a resource with extensive experience in supervising deployments and carrying our tests with the objective of maximizing homogeneity in the network and guaranteeing fulfillment of the corresponding requirements. We are working on the introduction and execution of other modernization initiatives in safety installations, such as the new system of ASFA digital in the convention network and the master plan to eliminate telephone blocks. So I think it's an opportunity, but if you let me explain a problem in this opportunity of liberalization that is not can respond from the administration is the lack of implementation of the ERTMS system in main section of the busing network corridors, which inevitably force the setting up of trains with a multitude of Class B system as the specific transmission modules in onboard equipment, especially from foreign operators. This will be vital to compete in the provision of internal passenger transport service once the market is liberalized at the end of the year 2020 due to the competitive disadvantage that this entails to the newcomers. With this being said, my greatest concern of following the liberalization process that we are facing right now in the Spanish railway market is the lack of response from signaling equipment companies for the request of provision for onboard LZB ATE equipment. It's well known that our first light high-speed line, Madrid-Sevilla, built in the early 90s, was equipped with the German LZV system before ERTMS was designed. More recently, in 2007, ADIF set up into service the high-speed railway line between Córdoba and Malaga, and this line was equipped with both ERTMS and LZV infrastructure systems. However, the potential candidates to enter in our railway network from December 2020 on have been denied the possibility of installing compatible LZV on-board equipment for their trains that would operate on those lines. This lack of response from the market would be a great setback for the liberalization process and would send an unfortunate message to railway users and the public in general. So it's a reflection I need translate for an answer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I believe the industry present here with Daniel, but I believe also in the audience have clearly heard the message. And more globally, I believe the availability of STMs is one of the issues that we have at European level, at least for the migration phase. Henrik, very briefly, we know what the key contribution of MOVE is because you mentioned it in your speech, but just in 2 sentences to repeat the message.
Well, I think it is pretty clear that we are building ourselves on the 4 pillars that I also described before, and I think that the most important thing is that we create the conditions and incentivize further the fast rollout of the ERTMS, and at the same time also creating the predictability of the future and making sure that the systems are interoperable, and there is also in the future there is the backward compatibility, and also that the central layer, the platform, the ERTMS platform is something which is future-proof and where the plug-and-play systems can be well put in practice. I think this is also what the Commission is trying to do, to work with all of you and to try to make sure that it will incentivize further the overall digitalization process. In the end of the day, we are all in it together, and I think it is absolutely essential that we will be able to work, all of us, the Commission, the Member States, the public authorities, the railway undertakings, the infrastructure managers, the rail supply sector, because in the end it's in everybody's interest, and it's in everybody's interest to create even better conditions for the rail systems and for the rail sector as such to develop. And very important point, international competitiveness. We are the world leader, and there's absolutely no doubt when it comes to the rolling stock, when it comes to the signaling, the many of rail solutions. And globally competitive, but we also know that this is not a fair, not always a market where it's a level playing field, and we also need to make sure that we support our industry in this endeavor. I think that is another very important element which hasn't been mentioned, but as you know, you are strong elsewhere when you are strong at home, and that's why we need to also continue to push within Europe for the maximum results, so that we will at the same time also maintain the global competitiveness. The last point I also want to make, and again I want very much to turn to you and your help, is that part of this process, a very important role is played by the Shift to Rail joint undertaking, where we have been trying to bring together a lot of the cooperation towards the innovative solutions. And this is going to be, I believe it's going to be extended. There will be a Shift to Rail 2, but in order to make this happen, we also need all of you to support that and to not keep it to yourself, but also to make as much noise as possible home and elsewhere. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Henrik. And again, to the audience, please support Shift Rail 2. We need collaborative innovation in Europe. But I also noted the point that one of our challenges is we need to be as strong in Europe as we are elsewhere. Carl, you have the final word.
I'll take 3 sentences.
Please.
3 things. One is to make sure that our certification process is as streamlined as possible to help industry get through that process. The second is to do what we can for collaboration like this in the States to make sure the railroads, the suppliers, and contractors, host and tenant railroads together and identify obstacles. And then finally, retrospective regulatory review. Keep an eye on our regulations, make sure we're not creating impediments to implementation of technology. So those are the 3 things that I think as regulators we can do in the United States.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you very much, all panelists. I believe the panel has deserved a great round of applause. Thank you all for a very lively discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Danny. Henrik.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Carl.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, before everybody is leaving, in the name of the CCRC conference organization team, we would like to thank all of you that you find your way to Valenciennes, and especially that you stayed till the end. Have a safe trip, have a safe trip home, and see you possibly in 2 years in our CCRC 2021 conference, or in one of our workshops we try to organize next year. Thank you. Bye-bye.